and hope everyone is doing well. For the record, my name is Cornelia Kent, and I am the CFO at HOC.
Hold it. Can I just,
Sure.
I'm sorry, interrupt you. I
Sure.
forgot. We need to approve minutes before we get
Ah,
into the business of the day. So, Commissioner Kelleher, have you reviewed the minutes and do you have any problems with the minutes? Or
I
you
do
want
not
nothing?
have any problems with the minutes, and I would move that we approve the minutes of the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee meeting of February 23rd, 2021.
Then, being the other commissioner present, I'll second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are approved. Now we will go to
fair enough.
the report.
So thank you again. And today we will be presenting the general fund and the public fund budgets for FY22. Tomi Adebo, the Assistant Budget Officer, will be making the presentation for us, and I will turn it over to Tomi.
I'm just going to share my screen. If you can just confirm that you're able to see the screen for me, please.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, good morning. In today's BFNA meeting, we will review the FY22 recommended budget and inform the committee of any changes before we present the budget for adoption. At the April 7th Commission meeting, we presented a balanced budget of approximately $292.2 million. Please note that the budget is balanced with a draw of $1.5 million from the General Fund Operating Reserve. This chart reflects the sources of funds received in the General Fund. These sources include fees for agency overhead of $10.8 million, represents 40% of the total revenue. We also received Development Corp fees from the properties of $5.1 million, approximately 19% of the total revenue. Depicted in the gray shaded area are the development fees generated by real estate of $1.6 million and the loan management and commitment fees generated by mortgage finance of $4.7 million. The budget also includes transfers depicted in yellow of $1.8 million, roughly 6.87% of the revenue. We also have the FHA risk sharing of $891,000 and other incomes. Include contributions of insurance reserves, interest income, and P card rebates of $265,000, just under 1%. As mentioned in the previous slide, we do have the draw from the GFOR of $1.5 million. Moving on to the expense side, this pie chart reflects the distribution of expenses in the general fund by accounting group. Personnel cost, which is consistently the largest expense in the general fund, is $18.9 million or 64.92%. Operating fees includes audit fees, building rent, bank fees, vehicle payments, and restrictions to the insurance reserves of $798,000. We have operating admin, which is $4.8 million, and that includes legal costs, supplies, telephone, postage, travel, and consulting costs. Operating other includes tenant services, security contracts, utilities, insurance, and taxes, which is about $615,000. We have maintenance expense for the Dietrich building, EDP, the service centers, and contract costs for IT, approximately $1.4 million. And finally, we have non-operating expenses comprised of FHA risk sharing reserves, funding for IT and facilities capital, funding for the tax credit deficit, interest payments, contributions to the replacement reserves, both the GFOR and the Opportunity Housing Property Reserves, making up $2.8 million or 9.54% of the total expenses. Moving to slide 5 or page 18. This chart depicts the general fund operating reserves, current sources and use, and projected balance based on the plans for FY22 and FY21. For FY21, there is projected interest income of $1,828 and projected draws of $1 million to balance the FY21 budget, $186,000 of actuals for FY20 Metro Point's operating deficit, and $149,000 for projected FY21 Metro Point operating deficit.
Tommy,
Yes.
would you mind hitting the plus sign and enlarging that?
Sure.
Between that, thanks.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. For FY22, we are projecting interest income of $1,800 and a contribution of $250,000. We are also projecting draws of $1.5 million to balance the 22 budget and $195,000 for the projected FY22 Metro Point operating deficit. The net effect is a projected decrease of $1.4 million for FY21, $1.5 million for FY22, with a projected balance of $2.1 million for June 22. This is only 1.5%. I'm gonna scoot down a bit. This is only 1.5% of the adjusted operating budget net of bond program, HAP, and grants. As a result of the reduced GFOR balance coupled with ongoing pandemic impact on our ability to generate income, cover costs, and replenish reserves, we are proposing a transfer of $4.27 million from the debt service reserve to the general fund operating reserves. This chart depicts the FY22 capital improvement budget for facilities and IT, totaling $1.1 million. The facility and IT budget is projected to be funding by the operating budgets. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time relating to the general fund before we move on to the public fund presentation.
I guess one question I have, and I don't know whether we do it now or in a later presentation. We've got two properties, one of which was mentioned earlier, that incur a deficit every year. And we've been looking at it to see whether or not there's anything that can be done to reduce that deficit. When do we talk about that?
So we're talking about, just to be clear, Metro Point and
Lasco.
Yeah. We can chat about it. I mean, if you'd like to stop here, we can chat about it. We can do it after the slide. It's your pleasure.
Well, I mean, since I raised it, we might as well do it now. I mean, I know I sort of raise it every year, but it still just bothers me. And I'm not suggesting that we're doing something wrong, because what we've said is that we've got structural deficits in both those projects. And I thought we were looking to see whether there was anything that could be done to overcome that.
Commissioner Nelson, on Lasco Manor, one of the things that we're looking to this year is ensuring where possible to cover the cost of counselors at our properties from our county grant.
Right.
And I will be including that in the calendar 22 budget for Lasco Manor. I don't believe it will completely cover the deficit, but it will assist and cover it although it does not affect the operational
Okay,
Yeah.
structural deficit at the property because of the nature of the property.
right.
So both of these have structural deficits. So can we just talk about LASCO real quick first, since Terry has pointed out an attempt to at least shore up some of the deficit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tiny building with elevators in one of the highest cost districts in the county. I know you know that. And frankly, given the rents we're charging, that one is a perpetual deficit. And the agency decided to take it on because we're talking about offering opportunities for folks.
Right.
We're formerly homeless and quite frankly are on the they're on the edge. That they're having a number of challenges. So 12 units, elevator building. There's just really nothing structurally we can do about that now. The benefit is when we have other properties making money or doing better than break even,
Mm-hmm.
we're able to assist that property and its structural deficit that way.
Okay.
Which I know you know, but for the good of for the viewing audience and for staff who are new. And then Metro Point is largely, it's similar in that the structural deficit there is persistent, and it's the consequence of us, the agency, building affordable housing in Wheaton that's multi-story on a relatively complicated site, given Metro right underneath, and then also hearkening and meeting mission by providing affordable units at a pretty high rate. But we built it at a time where, quite frankly, rates were up. We needed to move forward with the construction of that building. In order for us to really take care of the structural deficit, rents in that submarket would have to significantly rise on the market rate components. I think we have managed that structural deficit. We're the first in with new construction. And I think it was the right thing to do because it's an appropriate market for affordability. Again, the proximity to an underutilized and still, in my estimation, underutilized metro stop was important and remains to be, particularly given its proximity to the DC job market and the Montgomery County opportunity. So I think absent we manage costs very well there. It's generally leased above the 90s, generally in the high 90s. If we were to, and I know you're not talking about this, if we were to reduce our commitment to affordability and the depth of affordability, then we could deal with part of the structural deficit. Even then, this is one of those things that I think looked at the time, decided that meeting mission in a transit-oriented station, and then also helping to stabilize and make and stabilize the marketplace in that submarket, that Wheaton submarket, were worth it. And again, it's the benefit of our broad portfolio and the fact that it throws off cash flow that allows us to support that deep affordability at Metro Point.
Okay. And how does our occupancy compare with occupancy of the other multifamily in that area, the 3 other multifamilies? Do you know?
I think we're strong as a competitor there. Our rent certainly are a little bit lower than, they're lower than the one right across the street, which is newer and even more highly amenitized than ours. There are a couple around the corner that have traded a couple times. Our rents are competitive with those. We were first in market, and so I think that that definitely caused us some challenge in terms of the way we had to finance it in order to get it done, and then our commitment to affordability. We didn't, simply put, we did not inject subsidy away from HOC enough to make that pencil appropriately. And the truth of the matter, I don't even know that it was available during the time.
No, it wasn't. And I do recognize that we had significant additional costs because of the construction over Metro and a lot of the issues surrounding utilization of that site. Do we anticipate any effect from occupancy of the park and planning building if they ever open? I mean, I don't quite mean it that way. I mean, when COVID's over and they really begin to fully occupy and utilize that building.
I mean, look, I think the submarket will benefit from a large employer being located there, but I think it will take 3 to 5 years for that to fly through the residential.
Okay.
It would be unfair for me to characterize it indifferently, because big challenge there is that retail, the malls there, and retail is facing a huge challenge, and it's going to continue to do so for some time. Traditional office, non-governmental office facing a huge challenge. So I think that there'll be a little bit of ebb and flow for the directly foreseeable future. But if the county can see, if the Wheaton submarket can see an additional medium to large employers coming into the submarket, then yes, absolutely.
And I guess last question, is there any value in considering refinancing, or is it not possible right now?
Karine, are we locked? Are we in a lockout on that one?
So in 2 years, the swap, which is part of the financing, allows us to terminate at par. And so that's coterminous also with the initial 15 years of the tax credit, the low-income housing tax credit. So at that time, we can refinance, recapitalize. We're outside of the 10-year lockout on the bonds, so we can at that time look at refinancing and potentially renovating and starting a whole new financing. So we've got about 2 years to be able to make some decisions about the financing and renovation of the property if it's needed.
Okay.
And of course, some of that, I mean, is going to depend on what's happening in the capital marketplace. I apologize. Tell her you.
Fran?
I have a follow-up question on LASCO. I certainly understand that it's meeting mission, and we're a not-for-profit. We're not trying to make profits on every property, and we cross-subsidize so that we can meet these kinds of deficits. However, to the extent that it was due to the timing of our construction, the small only 12 units, and not having other affordable housing in that area, as we do create additional affordable housing in that area, is there an opportunity to relocate the residents into more efficient buildings that we have proximate to that same metro station, and perhaps even sell that property? That's always an option that we have legally to buy as well as sell property. Would it make sense to consider that as we reconsider options for refinancing it as well?
So on LASCO, its proximity to Metro wasn't really the driver, but rather the decision to build a service-rich
Right.
opportunity for persons who had faced homelessness and who were
Right.
looking for stabilization, and so
I need individuals.
right.
Understood.
And the
That's
site,
the mission part.
yeah, the site is tiny, and
Right.
so in order to get the appropriate, and by the way, the building is a nice building. It is well amenitized, but we're talking multi-story, and as a consequence, elevator building. And when you put an elevator in the expense, the operating and maintenance expense
In a small building.
over 12 units, there's almost no way, if you've got services that are appropriate for the persons that we're serving.
Could those services not be delivered as a component of a larger building?
We would then add cost, because what would wind up happening, so look, if we picked up the 12 and then put those folks in a larger building, spreading the cost across a larger building that's mixed income, then the answer is yes, we could probably be closer to break even. Theoretically, yes, that math could work. The challenge is, one, I don't think we're going to have a building, at least not in the very near term, in that submarket, that Bethesda submarket, that would allow us to offer that same opportunity around service provision to folks, and high touch. I mean, it's a couple steps away from assisted living for persons who were just out of homelessness and have some real challenges. So
okay,
I think that's the driver of it.
I just want to make sure we're thinking of all options and not saying because we own this, we have to always own it. In this,
No,
if we can accommodate the needs of the people. Obviously, the needs of the people are the driver. That's what we're going after. So,
does that also have resident staff?
not resident staff, but
daytime.
Who's there, for we don't share. We try not to share the management person there, but it's an individual who is also very well steeped in the service provision, not just the property management.
I mean, because that in itself is a difficulty if you're only serving 12 units. I mean, usually you have a manager who handles 50 units or so.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, could I go back to the presentation that we just heard from Tommy?
Sure.
On slide 3, I just want to make a comment because it's possible to misinterpret. I'm sorry, maybe it's the pie chart. There we go. Fees for agency overhead. That shows fees coming in from various programs as a percent of this pie. I don't want anyone to think that we have 40% overhead, because that would be a relatively outrageous amount of overhead for any organization. So I just want everyone to understand that percentage of reimbursed overhead as a part of this pie of revenue, and not what our cost structure looks like in terms of overhead. Correct?
Correct.
Yes.
To be clear,
Okay.
this is our sources of funds.
Right.
We should highlight that this is sources. You're right. And
it says that.
But we should in the discussion. It's also easy to miss it because it could be, depending on the screen, difficult.
And I say that because I know from my days at OMB, if this had showed up on my desk from an agency at OMB, 30% of that would have been cut out and sent back and said, you're living on 10% overhead, get used to it. And so I want people to understand that that's not that the organization is running a 40% overhead rate. So I appreciate that clarification or confirmation of my understanding of the situation.
Anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Then I guess we'll go to do we need to recommend sending this to the full commission, or is it? No.
This
Okay.
is just for discussion
Right,
purposes. We're not
right.
asking
No,
for
you're
any
right.
action.
You're right. Okay. All right, let's go to the next presentation on
Okay,
the
public fund.
yes, that was the general fund, right? Okay.
Okay, so the agency FY22 recommended budget was presented on April 7th, as we previously mentioned. The budget has not changed based on the general fund presentation we just reviewed. So now we're going to take a look at the public fund presentation. This chart shows a 5-year history of the program, including a summation of changes from the recommended to the revised budget. Changes from the FY22 recommended to the revised budget includes HAP funding increasing $2.6 million. HAP expenses has decreased $881,000 based on utilization, resulting in a surplus of $2.9 million. As a result, we're not going to need to draw the $600,000 and will be making a contribution to the reserves of $2.9 million. Additional changes include admin fees has decreased $72,000. There's also a decrease in operating fees of $14.4 thousand. Both are based on lower utilizations. Therefore, the projected contribution of $375,000 will be reduced by approximately $58,000, resulting in a contribution of $318,000 to the admin reserve. Moving on to the next slide. This chart depicts the distribution of non-HAP expenses. So as you can see, 59% of the non-HAP expense are personnel costs, approximately $5 million. 23% are fees, approximately $2 million. The majority of the fees are what's paid to HOC for overhead. We also have 18% of the expenses are other admin expenses. This includes inspections, consulting for systems, credit checks, programs, advertising, rent reasonableness, and utility allowance determination, credit and criminal checks, printing, postage, supplies, and travel costs. So this is our grant overview, looking at federal grants. We are not currently planning on supporting the agency operation from the Capital Fund program and therefore have not budgeted this program for FY22. The Fatherhood program was awarded another 5-year period and has increased to an amount of $998,000, which is $372,000 more than the previous award. We have not received increases thus far for the McKinney or the FSS Ross grants. Moving on to the state and county grants, funding for state RAP program ended in fiscal year 2019. The county contract has increased 200.
I'm sorry.
No. The county contract has increased $290,000 or 4.4% from the FY21 amended contract. This increase includes a placeholder for potential increases in compensation and benefit cost. Please note that the FY21 amended budget included a savings plan of $205,000, which has impacted the change. The closing cost funding has decreased by a small amount based on projected cost, as this is a reimbursable grant. We have not yet received new funding levels for the recordation program, which typically increases by about 3%. This includes the rent supplement program, the Move Up initiative, Community Choice Home initiative, and Youth Bridge initiative. Funding for the Service Coordinator grant ended April 2019. If there is an increase or decrease to any grants before June, they will be included in the proposed budget for adoption, brought forth for adoption. This chart represents the FY22 agency revised operating budget, summarizing changes we've made today. We began with a balanced budget using reserves. Now we show a shortfall of $14.4 thousand based on the reduced fees from the voucher program to the general fund for overhead expenses. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
So that's a reduce in HAP administrative fees that you just referred to?
No,
Yes.
that's the 14.4 is the net reduction in the management fees paid to the agency to cover overhead expenses. Those expenses went down in the voucher program because of the slight reduction in utilization projections. So that is the amount that flows to the bottom line of the agency. The reduction in admin fees that you see of 72,000 on that chart results in a reduction of the contribution to the admin reserve. So we had a surplus of admin fees in the recommended budget. That surplus has gone down a net of 58,000, as you can see on this bottom line, which is the net reduction in fee income to the program, offset by the reduction in fees paid to the agency for overhead.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
You have any other questions, Fran?
Not at the moment, thanks.
Thank you, Tommy. So our next meeting, we will be bringing forth opportunity housing as well as mortgage finance and real estate. We do anticipate additional changes during that meeting, after which we will discuss the balancing of the proposed budget that will be brought forth in June.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Tommy, you get the award for the shortest BFNA meeting during budget season.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I
Tony.
mean, I don't know what it is, but somehow it just sailed through it without serious issues and questions.
I think we've had such an unusual year that we've been keeping up on it month by month as we go through.
Well,
And
that's
so
true too. Yeah.
we're a little bit more cognizant of our strengths and weaknesses starting into budget because they've all been stressed this year.
Okay. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
And we'll
Do we
Have a
need a
great
motion
day.
to adjourn?
Oh, I guess we do. Yes.
I move that we adjourn today's Budget, Finance, and Administration Committee meeting.
Second, second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Then the meeting is hereby adjourned. Have a